Yeah, this is Alki Holic again with, I got a year of sober. Last time I made a video about sobriety, I had a year sober and I was celebrating by getting drunk and loaded, if you watch that video or whatever. And then I have another video where I'm not and blah 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 blah, but I'm going to get to the point here. Uh um I guess I feel partial to give this information to drug addicts and alcoholics because I've suffered from drug addiction and alcoholism since I was 5. I've already discussed this earlier. I was raised in an alcoholic home. My dad was a freaking drug dealer doctor that had a bunch of patients strung out and other doctors and other people. And he did all kinds of nasty things. And my mom was a freaking sherry drinking alcoholic teetotaler, and she sobered up before she died or whatever. But anyways, I started really freaking young, and it created all kinds of baggage and all kinds of mental garbage and stuff. And so at 19 years old, I made attempts to get sober, and I've tried thousands of different ways of getting sober or whatever, and if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, I wouldn't be alive right now. I wouldn't have made it this far in life in this point, and then I've relapsed hundreds of times. Blah, 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 blah. I've been in and out. I've had, longest I've ever had was 7 years. I've had 3 years. I've had 4 years. I've had a year a few times. I've had 18 months. I don't know, probably 3 times with that. I've had 6 months, probably 10 times. But all in all, I've been loaded and drunk more days on the planet than I have been sober. That's the bottom line. And there's all this bullshit. All this crap. I mean, I've been in and out of recovery forever, so I've seen everything. I mean, and I see all this crap, all this stuff about psychology, about pleasure reward centers in the brain, and all these freaking psychologist stuff, and all this religious stuff, and all these religious people pushing all this stuff, on how to get sober and clean or whatever. And then I've studied histories of the people that developed the AA program and NA program, and they all have conflicting histories and stories and things that they tried to do where they basically contradicted everything they did with their own behavior. They managed to stay clean and sober. So there's all these different religious people trying to push stuff at you and all that. It can be really confusing. I mean, you're coming off a drug and alcohol addiction, and life is just a frickin' mess, and you're used to living it all loaded and messed up, and then you might get a pink cloud, like you'll feel good for 90 days or something, and then reality will hit you in the face, and then you have to start dealing with some stuff. And I've seen people with 12 years in AA commit suicide. I've seen people with 20 years in AA commit suicide. I've seen people with 20 years go back to drinking or drugs, and within a few weeks they're dead. I mean, I've seen everything. Nothing phases me. I've been in and out of programs for years. But I guess what I really want to get at is you have to find out. I mean, I did. Me, Watashiwa, myself. I had to find out for me what was going to get me sober. Like I was saying, you hear all kinds of religious babble. You have people in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings telling you got to work these frickin' steps in these certain ways and all that stuff. You got to go make amends for all these things you did. I mean, some of these things you just can't do. But anyways, I've seen people that preach to people how to stay sober and all this stuff, and they have all these followers and all that, and they're sponsoring like 10 people, and then they go back out because they're in love with somebody that starts using again, and that sucks them right into it. I mean, what's that say about their sobriety or whatever, you know? I mean, so there's all these different avenues, all these different philosophies, all this stuff, different stuff you hear, you know? And the bottom line is it says it all here in my 1 year chip. And I'll have the lighting better on this so you can see it. If I can hold it right to the camera. To thine own self be true. You know, they tell you got to have a sponsor or a mentor or whatever. That's cool in the beginning. You know, but maybe you should have several and get several points of view or whatever. But you got to figure, like I just said there in the coin, you know, you got to be true to yourself. This is life or death. You know, I got a lot of shots at getting sober again. I got chances. I got breaks. I got lucky. You might not. Ooh, it's like a threat. But, you know, some people don't. Some people go back and they never get sober again. They never try again, or they go out one time and that's it. Or they relapse. And there's a lot of people in AA that just don't have a frickin' clue, and a lot of people in AA that just don't have a frickin' clue because they're trying to tell you, you gotta do what they did. And the truth is, you gotta find out what works for you. I can't say this enough to anybody. You have to dig deep. Like years ago, I took acting lessons. I think it was Stanislavski, and they called it like peeling the onion or whatever, wherever you search inside yourself and you find your own truth and all that. You gotta frickin' find out who you are. You gotta look in your mirror. And you're your own best doctor. I mean, I've seen like 30 psychiatrists, and most of them said that, you know, you're your own best shrink, or etc. was their philosophy to me. You know, and I think it's like in the coin I showed earlier, it's to your own self. You got to be true. That's, if you want to live, you got to be honest with yourself. You know, you don't have to be honest with your sponsor. You don't have to be honest with God. You don't have to be honest with your wife or your son or your employer. They're all going to pass away or disappear or move or change or whatever. But while you're on this planet, you know, in dealing with recovery and all that, you gotta you gotta find out who you are. You gotta look in the mirror if you want to live. That's the bottom line. And, you know, you'll have all these religious people and all these different people telling you to follow all these different paths and do what they did, but you got to look in the mirror at your stuff and figure it out. That's the only thing that's going to save your life, is you got to look in the mirror at your life. You got to take time out and think about your history, your childhood, your parents, your raising, all your life experiences, everything you've done in life. You need to analyze it and look at it and think about it. And then you study books and materials and tapes and everything and what people say at meetings or whatever, but you take it with a grain of salt. But it's your own recovery. What some people say that keeps him sober, and they say it will keep you sober, they're wrong. It will kill you. And I've seen it kill people. You have to decide what's going to save your ass for you. That's what I'm telling you. You have to decide for you what's going to save your butt. So, I mean, that's the bottom line. Most people can't do that. Most people, I've lived in different countries and societies and everything, they just turn on the frickin' news, they turn on the TV, they turn on the music or whatever, they brainwash themselves, they're inundated with the beliefs of their culture and their society and the brainwashing of everything going on, and they don't have a frickin' clue who they are. And if you want to live from alcoholism and drug addiction, you gotta know who you are. You're not gonna make it. And no one can tell you who you are. I can't. You have to look in your own mirror. You know, it's an inside job. And you have to be honest with yourself. That's all I can say. You know, so many people cannot sit in a room by themselves and think about their life and what they're doing in life. So many people have no idea who they are or what they're doing. They're just automatically watching TV or music or internet or whatever they're in. Whatever distractions are distracting them from who they really are and what their life really is and what they're really living. You know? And you have to, well, you don't have to. Maybe you do want to die and you don't want to know who you are, like a lot of people. But, you know, one has to get by the, you know, get rid of all that stimulation, all that media, everything your friends say, your spouse or whatever, you know, everybody, all those outside influences that are bombarding you with the radio and the television and the internet and everything. You have to get away from all that stuff if you want to live, and you have to be with yourself and look at your life by yourself if you want to live. And a lot of people can't do that. But if you want to live, that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to look in the mirror at you. And plenty of people want to do it for you, but they're not going to do a very good job. You got to look in the mirror at you, by yourself, without all the outside stimulation. If you know who you are, you want to know who you are, and you want to live. That's the bottom line. So, to thine own self be true, if you want to live. And that's the last thing I'm going to say.